For most of the modern era, the world has operated with a shared assumption about education. A good society produces more university graduates. A strong economy rewards academic degrees, and individuals move upward through formal schooling. This belief became deeply embedded across continents. From North America to Europe, from Africa to Asia, education systems gradually aligned around the same model. Expand universities, increase enrollment, produce more graduates each year. China followed this path as well. Over the past 2 decades, China built the largest higher education system in human history. By the early 2020s, the country was producing more than 10 million university graduates annually. In total, it has produced tens of millions of graduates within a single generation. At first glance, this looks like a major success story. A rapidly developing country expanding knowledge capacity at unprecedented scale. But beneath the growth, a structural imbalance began to appear. Even as universities expanded, employers in manufacturing, logistics, and advanced industry began reporting persistent skill shortages. Factories could not find enough trained technicians. Industrial firms struggled to recruit precision operators, and infrastructure projects required more specialized technical labor than the education system was producing. This created an unexpected paradox. More graduates did not automatically translate into more usable skills. And this realization has started to reshape how China approaches education. Modern industrial economies operate through complex systems. These systems include power networks, semiconductor fabrication plants, high-speed rail infrastructure, and automated production lines. Running such systems requires multiple layers of capability. At the top are researchers and scientists, but beneath them is a large technical workforce responsible for installation, calibration, maintenance, and optimization. Without that layer, even advanced technology cannot scale. This is not unique to China. Germany has long emphasized technical training through apprenticeships. Japan historically developed strong industrial skills through corporate training systems. But China is attempting something different. It is trying to rebalance education at national scale. Over the last decade, Chinese policymakers have increasingly emphasized vocational and technical education. Today, China has one of the largest vocational education systems in the world. Estimates from government and international sources suggest that tens of millions of students are enrolled in vocational schools and technical colleges across the country. In some industrial regions, a majority of new frontline manufacturing workers now come through vocational pathways rather than traditional academic universities. These workers are not limited to low-skill roles. Many are trained in robotics maintenance, advanced welding, industrial automation, and precision machining. These are high-skilled technical domains that require structured training and continuous upskilling. This shift reflects a broader redefinition of what counts as education. Instead of treating university as the default pathway, China is expanding multiple parallel tracks, elite academic research at the top, mass technical training in the middle, applied skills at the base. The goal is not to eliminate universities. It is to reduce overdependence on a single educational pathway. One of the forces driving this shift is demographic change. China's population is aging rapidly. The working-age population has already begun to decline. At the same time, the country still relies heavily on manufacturing and infrastructure. This creates a structural constraint. Fewer young workers must support a complex industrial economy. Under these conditions, productivity per worker becomes critical, and productivity increasingly depends on technical competence, not just academic credentials. This makes skills development a strategic priority rather than a social preference. There is also an economic dimension. In many countries, university expansion has led to degree inflation. As more people obtain degrees, the signaling value of those degrees declines. This has been observed across developed and developing economies. Graduate underemployment has become a recurring issue, especially in fields not directly linked to technical or scientific demand. China has experienced similar patterns. In recent years, youth unemployment among degree holders has periodically risen, even while technical roles remain difficult to fill. This mismatch has encouraged policymakers to rethink how education aligns with labor market needs. The question is no longer how many graduates a system produces. The question is whether those graduates possess skills that translate into economic function. China's industrial strategy also plays a role. The country has invested heavily in sectors such as electric vehicles, renewable energy, robotics, and advanced manufacturing. These sectors require layered talent structures. They need scientists and engineers, but also large numbers of technicians who can translate designs into scalable production. For example, building a semiconductor fabrication plant requires thousands of highly trained technical workers alongside a smaller number of research specialists. Without that base, advanced industries struggle to scale domestically. This helps explain why technical education is receiving renewed emphasis. It is not simply about education reform. It is about industrial capability. However, this transition is not without internal tension. Culturally, university education still carries strong social prestige in China. Many families continue to view academic degrees as the primary route to upward mobility. This creates a gap between policy priorities and social aspirations. Vocational education, despite reforms, can still be perceived as a secondary track in some regions. This tension is not unique to China. Similar dynamics exist in many countries where academic pathways are associated with status, even when labor markets signal rising demand for technical skills. Changing this perception often takes generations rather than years. Globally, the relevance of China's shift is growing. Across multiple economies, signs of educational realignment are emerging. In parts of Europe, apprenticeship models are receiving renewed attention. In North America, discussions around skilled trades and technical colleges are resurfacing. In emerging economies, policymakers are reconsidering whether universal university expansion is sustainable. At the same time, automation and artificial intelligence are reshaping labor demand. Some forms of routine knowledge work are becoming partially automated. Meanwhile, complex physical and technical tasks often remain difficult to automate fully. This may gradually increase the relative value of applied technical competence. If that trend continues, education systems built primarily around academic credentials may face structural pressure. This brings us back to the central question. Is China redefining education or simply responding earlier to a global shift? It is possible that China is not creating a new model, but accelerating an adjustment that many societies will eventually confront. Historically, education systems have evolved alongside economic structures. Agrarian societies prioritize practical knowledge tied to land and seasons. Industrial societies built mass schooling systems to support factories and bureaucracies. The late 20th century expanded universities to support knowledge economies. Now, the 21st century may be introducing another transition, one shaped by automation, aging populations, and complex technological systems. In such an environment, the definition of education may broaden again, not abandoning academic knowledge, but integrating it with applied capability. If this interpretation is correct, then the debate is not about choosing between universities and vocational schools. It is about balance. How many researchers does a society need? How many engineers? How many technicians? And how should education systems distribute resources across those layers? Different countries may answer differently depending on demographics, industrial structure, and cultural values. But the underlying question is becoming harder to ignore. What should education optimize for in a high-complexity economy? Prestige, access, flexibility, or functional capability? China's experience does not provide a universal template. Its political system, scale, and development trajectory are unique. Policies that work in China may not transfer directly to other societies. However, large-scale experiments can still generate signals. When a country of over 1 billion people adjusts its education priorities, the outcomes tend to be globally informative, even for nations that follow different models. This makes China less a blueprint and more a case study, a large ongoing test of how education adapts under pressure. Ultimately, the deeper issue may not be about China itself. It may be about a wider transformation in how societies understand knowledge and what they expect education to accomplish. For most of the modern era, education has been strongly tied to credentials. Degrees became the dominant way of measuring learning. They served two functions at the same time. First, they signaled exposure to structured knowledge. A university degree implied that an individual had passed through a standardized curriculum and acquired a baseline intellectual foundation. Second, degrees functioned as social signals. They indicated discipline, persistence, and conformity to institutional expectations. Employers, governments, and social institutions used credentials as shorthand for competence, even when the link between a degree and actual capability was indirect. This model worked relatively well in slower, more hierarchical economies. In industrial and bureaucratic systems, standardized credentials simplified decision-making. Large organizations needed scalable ways to filter talent, and degrees provided that filter. But as economies become more technologically layered, the connection between knowledge and capability becomes less linear. In earlier eras, knowledge accumulation and practical application were often closely aligned. A trained accountant performed accounting. A trained engineer worked in a clearly defined engineering role. A trained lawyer followed a relatively stable professional path. Today, those boundaries are becoming more fluid. Technology is compressing timelines between discovery and application. New tools allow individuals to access knowledge without passing through traditional institutions. At the same time, entire fields are evolving faster than academic curricula can update. This creates a divergence between formal learning and applied competence. In some domains, practical skill is becoming more decisive than formal credentials. Advanced manufacturing, software tooling, technical maintenance, and applied digital systems often reward hands-on capability and continuous adaptation. In other domains, formal research remains indispensable. Fundamental science, high-level medicine, theoretical physics, and advanced materials research still rely heavily on long institutional training and deep academic ecosystems. This creates a more differentiated landscape of knowledge. Instead of a single hierarchy where academic education sits at the top, multiple forms of expertise begin to coexist. Some are institution-centered, others are practice-centered, some are theory-driven, others are system-driven. As this differentiation deepens, education systems may become more plural. A plural education system is not one where standards collapse. It is one where multiple pathways carry legitimacy at the same time. Academic universities may continue to dominate foundational research and intellectual training. Technical institutes may specialize in applied capability and systems fluency. Hybrid models may emerge that blend academic rigor with industrial immersion. In such a system, the idea of a single dominant track becomes less stable. The traditional linear pathway, school, university, career, may gradually give way to more modular trajectories. Individuals may move in and out of formal education at different stages of life. Skills may be updated continuously rather than front-loaded in early adulthood. Learning may become more cyclical than sequential. If that transition unfolds, the meaning of being educated may expand rather than contract. Education would no longer refer only to time spent inside formal institutions. It would increasingly refer to demonstrated capability across different environments. Someone deeply skilled in complex systems without a traditional academic background might still be considered highly educated in a functional sense. At the same time, formal scholars would continue to anchor domains that require sustained theoretical depth. This broader definition does not necessarily diminish academic learning. Instead, it situates it within a wider ecosystem of knowledge forms. This brings us back to the unresolved question. Is China moving ahead of a global transition or simply responding to domestic pressures at scale? It is possible that China is encountering structural realities earlier due to its unique combination of size, industrial depth, and demographic shifts. Large systems often surface tensions sooner because imbalances scale faster. At the same time, similar pressures are beginning to appear in other regions, though often less visibly. Aging populations, automation, rising education costs, and labor market mismatches are not confined to any single country. Because of this, the answer may only become clear over a longer horizon. Educational transformations tend to unfold across decades rather than years. Institutional inertia is strong, and cultural expectations around schooling evolve slowly. However, one pattern is becoming increasingly visible. The assumption that education must follow a single universal model is weakening. For much of the 20th century, there was a growing convergence in global education systems. Mass schooling expanded. University enrollment rose across continents. A shared template gradually formed, even among very different societies. Now that convergence appears to be loosening. Different countries are beginning to experiment again. Some are investing more heavily in apprenticeships and technical training. Others are doubling down on elite research ecosystems. Some are exploring modular learning, online credentials, or lifelong education frameworks. These experiments reflect a broader recognition that the link between education and economic structure is tightening again. As that recognition spreads, space opens for divergence. Different societies may pursue different balances between academic knowledge and applied skill, depending on their demographic realities, industrial priorities, and cultural values. Highly industrial economies may prioritize technical mastery. Knowledge service economies may continue emphasizing academic depth. Emerging economies may attempt hybrid models that combine mass education with targeted skill development. Not all of these models will succeed. Some may struggle with legitimacy if alternative pathways lack social recognition. Others may face quality issues if rapid experimentation outpaces institutional capacity. Still others may encounter resistance from entrenched expectations about what education should look like. But even failed experiments can reshape the conversation by revealing limits of existing assumptions. And that conversation is already shifting. Importantly, it is not shifting toward less education. Global demand for knowledge is still rising, not falling. Instead, the shift appears to be toward a broader definition of what education includes and how it is delivered. Education may become less about a single credential earned early in life and more about an evolving portfolio of capabilities accumulated over time. If that happens, societies may begin valuing flexibility in learning pathways alongside depth of knowledge. In that unfolding debate, China's experience is likely to remain a prominent reference point, not because it provides a final answer and not because its model will be universally adopted, but because large-scale shifts are easier to observe in large systems. When a country with vast institutional reach adjusts its education priorities, the effects become visible in labor markets, industry performance, and social mobility patterns. This visibility turns the country into a kind of real-time case study. Observers can analyze outcomes, identify strengths and weaknesses, and adapt insights to their own contexts. In this sense, China's role may be less about leading or defining the future of education and more about accelerating a global reflection. It compels other societies to re-examine assumptions that once seemed settled. It raises questions about alignment between schooling and economic reality. It highlights tensions between prestige and practicality, between credentials and competence. And by forcing those questions into the open, it makes the broader conversation more serious. Not necessarily more polarized, but more grounded. Because once foundational assumptions begin to loosen, debates tend to deepen, and education, perhaps more than any other institution, reflects how societies imagine their future. Which means that any shift in how education is understood is never purely technical, it is civilizational. And that is why the implications extend far beyond any single country.